Lech Lecha is the third parsha of Torah. And in this Torah portion, we have where God calls Abraham. He goes into Mitzrayim because of a severe drought. He separates himself from Lot. There's the war of the 4 kings versus the 5 kings. That's an interesting little thing. The covenant of the parts happens in this week. There's a tension between Sarai and Hagar that doesn't end well, and then the covenant of circumcision. So, I might even have all the stats for the parsha here, but I won't share them with you. So anyway, the Torah portion begins with, the Lord said to Avram, "Go for yourself out of your country, from your relatives, and from your father's house to a land I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I will curse. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you." So, Avram was specifically commanded 3 things at the beginning. Get yourself out of your country, from your relatives, and from your father's house. So I was asked, did Avram sin by bringing his nephew with him from his father's house? So let me ask you a question. How long does someone have to obey a positive commandment? For instance, be fruitful and multiply. 13 years old, do I have to start? Or do I have time? I thought about starting easier, saying how long does somebody have to fulfill a negative commandment? But I decided not to go there. So how long did it take Avram to get out of his country? How long did it take Avram to get away from his relatives? And how long did it take Abraham to get away from his father's house? So how long does it take somebody to obey a positive commandment? The answer is in Abraham's life can be a little surprising and shocking, because it was for me when I actually worked with the numbers. So let me ask you this: how well do you know Abraham? If I was asked why God chose Abraham, would you be able to answer?
Yes.
If I asked you about the sequence of the events in his life, would you know? The Torah seems to be pretty clear. So here's another question: was he an idolater? Was his wife? What about Lot? What about his father? So, in Rosh Hashanah 18b, again the Bavli, Rabbi Yitzchak makes a dual statement that I found to be very profound, and I hope you do as well. Because it was profound for me, but it really helped begin to solidify my understanding of Lech Lecha. So what I did was the intertwining commentary, I went ahead and removed it because otherwise it might be a little confusing. So here's what Rabbi Yitzchak says. He says, 3 things cause a person's sin to be recalled or remembered by the heavenly court. Passing under a leaning wall. Yeah, nice eyebrow lift. Expecting prayer to be answered. And submitting to judgment one's fellow to heaven. Rabbi Yitzchak further said 4 things cause a harsh decree against a person to be torn up: charity, crying out, a change of name, and a change of action. In the Gemara, revolving around these texts, the rabbis discuss the significance of these statements and show their sources are indeed biblical in nature and scope. So none of this is rabbinic, and none of their things that they come up with are rabbinic in nature. Under the phrase of a change in name, the text makes mention of Sarai's name change, as it says, "Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah." So her name was changed. So, taken in context with the Talmud passage, we're granted a peek into the mercy of Hashem and his grace. By changing Sarai's name to Sarah, we see that the lifestyle that she grew up with changed. So what do you think her lifestyle was? She lived in Ur the Chazdim. But in either case, it was thrown away. That decree was gone. Hashem erased it. He made Abraham know without a shadow of doubt that his wife was forgiven. In addition, we see further the blessings of God on our father's wife. I will bless her indeed. I will give her a son through you. The change from idol worshiper to tzaddik does not end with Sarah. Abraham too saw redemption from Hashem, from his idolatry, and I know that's hard to swallow, and I'm okay with that. Because the Talmud mentions above, it continues and provides a fifth way to overturn an evil decree. Some also say a change of place, for it is written, Hashem said to Abraham, go, you, from this place, and then I will make you a great nation. By mentioning Avram and his change of place, the rabbis of old realize atonement for his former idolatry. But what is phenomenal about Abraham is how he comes to understand the significance, for lack of a better term to use, ethical monotheism. The Gemara and the Midrash speak of the things that he did to come to realize that there can only be one God. There's even a section that suggests Abraham tried every type of idolatry that existed in search of God. So if this Midrash is true, then it means Abraham dabbled in the worship of Moloch. You guys understand? Okay, so I don't have to go into that. So perhaps that could explain why the Akedah may not have been the first time that a God told him to sacrifice a son. Wrap your head around that for a second. Personally, I have a problem with that, but Avram had a change of place, had a change of name, which is indicative of forgiveness. So the Torah from last week says, and Terah took his son Avram and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the effect of Avram and his search for God had an effect on his father. Or it even could have been the other way around too. The text really doesn't solidify that. But sadly, Terah only made it about halfway to 2/3 of the way to Canaan from Ur before he drove his tent stakes into the dirt and decided to stay there. Once Terah stopped, for whatever reason, God called Abram to continue the emigration to the land of promise. Now, there is a lot of evil that the Midrash attributes to Terah. And I can't help but think that the purpose of these stories is to create a stark difference, contrast between him and his son Abram. The Torah does not tell us why Abram is chosen. The stories then give us anecdotal evidence to justify this choice. It's just, God just shows up one day and says, Abraham. What I decided to do was to try to explain the life of Abraham. Because if you just read it, you're going to be confused as to what is really going on. So what I got is I got a Chumash here, Sephorno. You guys get a chance. Sephorno. I mean, it's like every commentary that he has, which is usually 2 to 3 sentences, is like a week's worth of work for us to research and to learn. I mean, the guy is really deep and really quite an awesome commentator. So we're going to begin with last week, because Abram's life begins last week. It doesn't begin in chapter 12. Now, these are the generations of Terah. Terah begot Abram. Rabbi Abba ben Kahana said, whoever has his name thus repeated has a portion in the world and in the world to come. They raise an objection to him. But it is written, now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begot Abraham. Name is there twice, 2 times in a row. That too does not disprove it. He replied, "What is the meaning of, 'But you, Abraham, shall go to your fathers in peace'?" God informed him that his father had a portion in the world to come. So my point in bringing this up is, while the Midrash will give and attribute Terah all sorts of evil, what they're trying to do is create, like I said, they're trying to create a stark difference between the two of them to express how special Abraham is in God's plan. But that does not necessarily mean that that's the way that Terah was his whole life. Was he raised? Did he begin his life as an idolater? Absolutely. He lived in Ur of Kasdim, the fires of Kasdim. That's what Ur means, which also was why the Midrash talks about Abraham being thrown into the furnace. The furnace shows up when they're building the Tower of Babel. That's where the furnace is. So by the conservation or the law of conservation of furnaces, here it is, Ur Kasdim. Now, the biblical events of Abraham's life took a little bit of research to figure out. So anyways, what I'd like to do is begin with year zero. Year zero is when Adam and Chava were created, were formed. So in the year 1878, Terach is born. Noah is 822 years old, by the way. So in 1948, that's going to be an easy number for you to remember, Avram is born in Ur Kasdim. 10 years later, in 1958, Sarah is born. And in 1988, according to Avos 5:2 and Hilkos Avidas Kohavim, Abraham becomes aware of his Creator. And how old is he? He is 40 years old. Now, some attribute this and say he began at 3. The Tower of Babel ends in the year 1996. That's when languages are split. People decide to go their own separate ways. Oh, you speak my language, let's go this way, let's go that way. And that's when Terah leaves Ur Kasdim, is at that point. Noah is 940 years old. And Shem, 438 years. Abraham is 48 years old at this point. See why it's confusing? All this happened, and then Noah is born, and then we think there's a complete disconnect between the events, but they're not. They're all severely interlinked. Okay, Nahor in the year 2000 begins teaching ethical monotheism, according to the Talmud. 2006, Noah dies at 950 years old. Shem is 448. Avram, he's still Avram, is 58. So in the year 2018, Abraham has the covenant of the parts. So this is where Abraham is supposed to leave his father's house. But the year 2023, let's go, 2018, that's also the beginning of the 430 years that are mentioned in Exodus 12:4. With the 430 years is your people or your offspring will be in a land that's not theirs. Okay, that's where the 2018, the 430 years begins. 5 years later, Avram leaves Haran and leaves his father's house and brings Lot with him. 5 years later. So how long does it take before we have to do a positive commandment? Well, so far we have 5 years. 2033, Abram marries Hagar at the behest of, or bequest of Sarai. And so 1 year later, 2034, Ishmael is born. And Shem is 476 years old. Shem is still alive. So 2047, Abraham meets with Hashem and is foretold the birth of Yitzhak. Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed at this point. And Lot has about that nobody should ever have a bout with. Terrible things. That is the same year that Abraham moves to Mamre, and Shem is still alive at 489 years old, and Abraham is 99. Year 2048, Isaac is born, and the 400 years of promise begin now. 400 years from here, we depart from Egypt. Shem is still alive at 490 years old. 2074, Rivka is born. Abraham is 101. Ishmael is 15. Isaac is 26. The Aydat happens in the year 2085. And that's when Sarah dies. Abraham dies at 175 years, the year 2123, and Shem is still alive at 565 years. No, I don't, and that's where my notes stop here. Was at 2123. Abraham dies at 175. Esau sells his birthright to Yaakov at the funeral. So the point is the Torah does not worry about chronological order. It worries about topical subjects. So when it gives a he begat him and whatever, all the begats that nobody likes to read, all those are lumped together because that's a topic. Abraham's life is a topic. Isaac's life is a topic. Now here's another thing. Okay, we have Isaac, and then he dies, and then it deals with Jacob, and then Jacob loses his son, and thinks his son is dead, and then it says his father tried to console him, but his father is already dead according to the Torah. But it's not. His father is still alive, and is alive until about 2 or 3 years before Yosef and Yitzhak are recombined. But we don't know this unless we actually sit and kind of fiddle with the numbers. But there is one thing that I would like to talk about, and that is the war. The war of the 4 kings, or 4 kings versus the 5 kings. Abraham, for the most part, was a fat pacifist. But that war ultimately came to him because his nephew was captured. Now, what's interesting is the 4 kings come down, and what they do, they take over 4 city-states that are kind of around the Dead Sea area. And then the war continues, and they go and they invade Canaan, and they take over Canaan. But the mistake that they make is when they're at Sodom, they capture Lot. We have no idea why. One midrash says that they really did not like Abraham, so that's why they stole him. But in either case, when Lot is taken, Abraham cannot stand idly by. As they say, you never leave a brother behind. So Abraham grabs his army. Kind of interesting to think that Abraham has an army. But he has an army, and he goes and he hunts down the 4 kings. And he finds the 4 kings in the land of Dan, who happens to be one of the 12 landowning sons of Jacob, of Yaakov. Of course, that's anachronistic, because at some point somebody added that commentary in. And there, Abraham defeats and wipes them out. So, who owns Sodom? Who owns Gomorrah? Who owns the land of Canaan at this point? Abraham does. So God promised Abraham that he was going to be a great nation, which he's already a nation. He's got has his own standing army. But he by defeating the 4 armies, he won the land of Canaan. It was his. Kind of amazing to think about. The promise was fulfilled, but he didn't take it. The king of Sodom comes and says, you can keep all the stuff, but give me the people. Because he wanted his people back. And Abraham says, no, I know your reputation, dude. No, you can have the people and you can have everything. I mean, even to the shoelace, you keep it all, because I don't want you to ever say, I made Abraham rich. I mean, that's how bad Sodom was. That's the reputation that Sodom had. But I just wanted to show you that it wasn't just the book of Devarim where we take over some of the land, where the conquest begins, and we take over some of the land, and then the conquest continues in the book of Yehoshua. We actually won it in the land, or during the time of Abraham. So this standing army, who inherited that standing army? Isaac. Who inherited it from Isaac? Jacob. So here's another thing. During the book of Genesis, Jacob gets a new name. A new name? Israel. And you would think, well, now his name is Israel. We're never going to use the name Jacob again. But no, the name keeps on going back and forth. Sometimes Israel, sometimes Jacob. And why is that? It's because that's when we became a nation. Whenever it's referring to nationhood, the name Israel is used. Whenever it's referring to the person, Jacob is used. Because remember, God pulled a nation out of another nation. We were a nation before we went to Egypt. Good Shabbos.